What's happening? What's happening, y'all? It's me coming back at you again with the live streaming vid. I promise I'll make this pretty quickly, so I'm not gonna be too long on here. But just wanted to give you guys my insight and thoughts on the recent Deontay Wilder interview that took place. That was about a couple of days ago. It was on the Byron Scott podcast, and what do you know? What a small world! I did not know that Byron Scott had an actual podcast. So people who may not know who Byron Scott is, Byron Scott is a former basketball player who's known for his supporting role in the 1980s, in some cases in the 90s too, where he played a pivotal role in the Los Angeles Lakers Showtime era championship teams. He played a role in their championship win in 84, 85, 86, 87, and 87, 88 when they went back to back during that time against the Boston Celtics and Detroit Pistons, respectfully. Of course, Byron was not on the team when the Lakers won the championship in 80 to 82. That was a time when Magic, Kareem, and James Worthy were on that team. Actually, James Worthy didn't. I think he came in at 81, I believe. So he was on the 82 team. So he came in his rookie year where they won the championship. But anyhow, um, so anyways, people don't know that Byron Scott and Deontay Wilder are good friends. They are very good friends, and it was a very delightful conversation because Byron was interviewing. He was interviewing not only Deontay, but he was also interviewing his wife Telly, whatnot, and he's also had some interviews with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of his old teammates. And during that course of the interview, there was one particular statement that kind of got to me. Um, he, Byron pretty much asked the question. He kind of asked this question like three times. He kind of circled it back about Deontay Wilder's decision on would he want to come back or not. And Byron kind of let him know honestly that you got a lot more to offer in boxing, man. We want to see you come back, but it is up to you. Deontay was pretty much, you know how Deontay likes to do. He liked to answer questions in third person. His wife had to interject and say, he asked you a question about boxing. He's like, I'll get there. Let me tell you. I thought that was a bit of a funny moment there. So basically, what Deontay said is that he is close to making that decision to returning, but he still has to do some soul searching on that. But at the end of the day, he's relaxing. He's having a good time, with his life. He seems in very good health. He doesn't seem too deterred after that brutal fight that he had with Fury. But who knows? Taking a beating like that can take a lot out of you, not only physically, but mentally as well. But it seems like he still has his physical strengths, but his mental strength is definitely in question. So what up, Percy? What it do, brother? What it do? Whatnot. So, but besides the point, Byron Scott had made an interesting point, and an interesting point that I want to challenge a little. Not saying challenge, but I wanted to address. Um, and when he asked the question about Deontay Wilder, hey champ, you have a lot to offer. I want to see you come back. He said Deontay did answer like, well, part of me, is just sick and tired of the sport. All the politics that I had to deal with, the decision making process, people cheating, this, that, and the third. I know some people are going to look at that and say, are you still dwelling on the Tyson Fury allegations? I'm not sure if that's what he meant. But I think as an overall scope, there's many guys who are cheating in the sport of boxing, which is true. A lot of guys in the heavyweight division have been popped for PEDs, Tyson Fury particularly in the past. But it is no excuse. There was no shenanigans when it comes to that in their third fight, let alone their second fight, even though there was a controversy behind that. And I felt a lot of guys had capitalized on that to make money and profit off of that for 2 years. That's just my opinion. And since that, Wilder took that loss, he had, those guys have pretty much had to push back. Now they push back. They had to accept the situation for what it is. The reality is that Deontay Wilder just wasn't good enough to beat Fury. He almost knocked him out, yes, but he just wasn't good enough. What's up, D-Style? So Byron Scott gave the interview. Actually, I want to show you guys a little bit of that. I'm not trying to get a strike or anything like that. I just want to show you guys a little bit of a screenshot. I did not know Byron had a podcast. But anyways, when Deontay was answering the question, when he mentioned that there's so much politics and so much of the bullshit that's going on in sport and boxing where I have to, where things are just not as right as I see fit. And look, at the end of the day, I'm the one who's taking punches in the head. I'm the one who risking myself going in the ring. I have a right to say what I want to say, which is a valid point. Fair enough. And then Byron had said, you know what was funny about that? I'm just only paraphrasing what Byron Scott said. Byron Scott said, um, he said that it reminds me of time with me and the sorry guys, I'm gonna pause that. I hope I don't get a strike. But anyways, he said, I'm gonna go ahead and share it real quickly. Byron Scott said that I remember a time when me and the guys were playing back in the day, mentioning the Showtime era with the Lakers, with Magic, Kareem, and James Worthy, Jamal Wilkes. I think he played with Jamal Wilkes at least for his last two seasons of his career, whatnot. He played with those guys, and he said that when we were going up against the Boston Celtics, people hated us. This is what Byron said. People hated us because when we beat the Celtics, it's like it was just like an all out vitriol, disrespect. People didn't like us because they thought, because we were the black team, and then the Celtics were the white team. Now, I respect Byron, I really do. He was a very pivotal, crucial player on that Showtime era team. I respect his work, and even as a coach. He turned out to be a decent coach. Leading the New Jersey Nets to two. How many NBA Finals appearances? I think two of them. Yeah, two of them in the early 2000s with Jason Kidd, amongst others, and Keith Van Horn. But anyhow, as you can see, this photo right here, this is an interview that took place recently. And like I said, these guys are good friends. And they've been friends for a while, but I did not know that Byron Scott had a podcast. But anyways, let me get back to the point. He said that the Celtics were the white team and the Lakers were the black team. Now, I have to contend on that a little bit because I can tell you, watching basketball in the early 80s as a kid, the Boston Celtics, yeah, their star player was Caucasian, Larry Bird. We all know who Larry Bird is. Larry Legend, one of the greatest players of all time. We all know who he is. Larry Bird, along with Kevin McHale, another great Caucasian player, all-time great. But the Boston Celtics had some great black players as well, Hall of Fame teams throughout the years in the Celtics organization, throughout their entire history. You had guys like Bill Russell, obviously. You have guys like Robert Parrish, who played on that Celtics team in the 80s, the Chief. Then you had Dennis Johnson, God rest his soul, the point guard. And then you had role players like ML Carr and Cedric Maxwell and those guys. So I'm not sure if Byron was right to say that in a way. I pretty much have to disagree with him slightly, but I do understand where he's coming from to an extent because back then the Celtics, their fan base was predominantly Caucasian, obviously because in New England area, it's pretty much at the time, I'm not sure what the demographic. I mean, I'm sure the demographic has become diversified over the years, but back then it was more the Celtics were more, they appeal more to the Caucasian fan base back then. So he pretty much he said that it was a tribalistic thing when the Lakers and the Celtics played back in the day, and he said that they were the most hated team. I do not agree with that. I thought the Lakers were very, very revered. I'm not saying not everybody liked them, but I think Byron's a little bit wrong on that, in my opinion, because let's not forget, I think the most hated team back in the day was the Detroit Pistons. Now, if you don't know who the Detroit Pistons were, you had guys like Isaiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer, Joe Dumars, Rick Mahorn, James Edwards. I mean, these guys were the team that you love to hate so much. You know why? Because back then, the Detroit Pistons had this physicality mindset that if you're going to score on us, you're going to really have to work hard for it, which means if you think you're going to dunk on us, if you think you're going to drive down the hole, think again, because we're going to hit you so hard and make you think twice before you come down the middle. We're going to force you to take jump shots. We're not going to tell you you're not going to have an easy ride coming down the middle, coming down the lane for a layup or coming for a dunk. We're going to hit you hard. And I think that's part of the reason why we have this stupid flagrant foul rule. Not saying it shouldn't be implemented because some guys were just blatantly doing it just to potentially hurt guys. I get it, but I think it's just gone too far. And the urban legend is that Michael Jordan actually had a sit down with the league office officials at the time, and David Stern was obviously in that meeting where he complained, and I think this is before the 1991 season, where he complained about the Pistons being using these dirty tactics just to win games. So some people felt that David Stern, implementing the flagrant foul rule, at the beginning of the 1991 season was a shot at the Detroit Pistons. Now, let's be fair. I hated the Detroit Pistons. I didn't like them. I hate them, especially with the way they beat my Lakers back in the 89 season, all right? I was a kid. I was crying because the Lakers got creamed in that series. They got murdered. But anyways, I get why people didn't like the Detroit Pistons. I get why there's some gripe why that flagrant foul rule was implemented, because it was to get back at them, just to make sure they didn't really have a chance to really use their greatest weapon to defeat guys. When they used those rough out tactics, it was not, you could say it was intentionally to hurt guys, but it was just to get into their minds as well, because it was more of a psychological aspect of the game where the Pistons implemented against their opponents. Now, to be fair, the Lakers, the Celtics, they used dirty tactics as well. They used to hurt guys on the court too, but yet they got away with it because they were the two most revered teams back in the day. The Pistons weren't. So, I guess I'm getting off the point a little bit, but my point is that I just didn't agree with Byron, what he said right there, just to, agree with Deontay's point about being, there's a lot of haters, a lot of tribalism. Yeah, and Deontay's right about there. There is a lot of tribalism. There's a lot of politics in sports, but some would argue that Deontay politics did benefit him, in his early on his run as a champion, because he was allowed to, Al Heyman was allowed, Al Heyman helped him, build, not say build up his resume, but pad his resume, as you want to call it, on guys who shouldn't have been in the ring with him when he was a champion. So, some people are going to look at that as a bit of a double standard for Deontay Wilder to say that, but, at the same time, he is telling the truth. I agree with it. So, the Watcher says that, what up, Boxing Lounge? He says that Wilder needs to retire. You know what? If he wants to retire, then so be it, but I still think that he's still got something left to offer. I think he needs to come back and get a couple good wins. Get a Parker win, because I know there was talk about Joseph Parker. Get a Parker win. Get a Dillian Whyte or an Anthony Joshua win. If you can get those 2 wins on your belt, then maybe you can call it a career, but I think you need to get 2 or 3 major wins on your belt before you decide to call it quits. Hell, if you don't win, you don't win. At least you got in the ring with those guys. People can't fault you for that. So I really believe that he's got 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in. I think he's already made up his mind that he's going to take a few more fights, and he's done. There's 0 point for him to continuing. I get that from the fact that the physicality that he went through with Fury in those in those 3 fights. Not so much in the first fight, but definitely the second and third fight. I get that, because that could take a lot out of you. But the thing that kind of gets me is that if Deontay Wilder retires today, I don't consider him an all-time great. I'm just keeping it real. He's my favorite. He is my favorite heavyweight, but he's not an all-time great. I don't see where you could put him in the list of all-time great heavyweights. I just don't see how you could put him in there. Could you put him in the Hall of Fame? I mean, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but based off projection and based off his popularity, there's a possibility he could go in there based off the Fury fights, even though he didn't win it. He was a champion, long-reigning champion for so long. Yeah, so I guess he'll get on there. He'll get in on that merit, but I just don't think he's a Hall of Famer from a morale standpoint, if that makes any sense. So I just think that he's still got something to prove, man, because I think the thing is that I don't want him to go out. Like I said, it's his decision. It's his health, that he has to, think about. But this is like a Riddick Bowe situation to me, man, because Riddick Bowe left the sport with a lot of question marks on his resume. Yes, he fought some pretty good, decent guys coming up the ranks before he fought Holyfield. But after he beat Holyfield, what did Riddick Bowe do? He had a couple title defenses here and there, but the guy was just like out of control with his weight, not disciplined, not listening to Eddie Futch, getting to fights with his, in fights with his team, causing, a lot of havoc outside the ring, punching guys in the presser, like with Larry Donald in the face off. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? I mean, he was getting out of control. And part of me was glad that Andrew Golota did what he did to him. But, Yeah, sorry. So yeah, it's kind of like that Riddick. It's like that Riddick Bowe vibe. Like you're a good fighter, but you still have more to prove at that point. And you walking away the sport the way you did, it just leaves a bad taste in it just leaves a bad taste in in people's mouths. You know what I mean? So no pun intended, but I'm just saying though, I just think Deontay could offer some more. He can get a couple fights in, and then after that, he's done. Uh, Wilder versus Joshua is still a huge fight. Yeah, that's still a huge money fight. That's like close to $100 million gate fight. I'm not gate, a revenue fight. Watcher says that, well, too bad. Matter of people's perspective, but this is about his health. Yeah, it is about his health. But like I said, though, he doesn't seem too. I mean, he seems okay. He seems like the same guy like he was before the Fury fights. But again, we have to see what what he is mentally if he decides he wants to continue. But like Byron Scott said, though, and I agree with Byron Scott. Byron Scott told him, was like, dude, you still got a lot to offer, man. He pretty much told him that you still got holes in your resume that you need to fill. I mean, the good thing I'd see is Deontay Wilder versus the Riddick Bowe situation is that Riddick Bowe pretty much was done because Riddick Bowe took a lot of punishment before he fought Galata. A lot of punishment. The punishment in those 3 Holyfield fights, the punishments against guys he shouldn't even be taking punishment against. Subpar guys who are way past their best, like Pinklet Thomas and Tyrell Biggs. He was getting hit against those guys. It's like, what? These guys are like washed up, shot over the hill like Tyrell Biggs, and Biggs was giving them the business in that fight. So I'm like, okay. Now, Riddick Bowe, can understand, he was done at that point, not only from a mental standpoint, but from a physical standpoint. Galata pretty much finished him off. Now, Wilder, on the other hand, the only guy that gave him so much punishment, I mean, other than the Luis Ortiz fight, was just Ortiz and Fury. That's it. Riddick Bowe went through way more fights with punishment, and I could see how he left the sport the way he did. Deontay Wilder, I don't think he's in that type of position like Riddick Bowe. That's why I think he's got a few more fights left in him. But again, if he wants to go on and do something else, that's up to him. I can't fault him for that. But in my opinion, he's not an all-time great if he retires right now. I think I'll be disappointed. I'll be honest with you. Part of me will be disappointed if he retires because I think he has more to prove. That's just my opinion. Shout out to the fight doctor. Khan has been knocked out so many times that people said nothing about his wealth. Wilder's fine. Yeah, you know what? Hey, Brotherhood, I agree with that. I totally agree. Khan has been beaten up and he's been knocked out way so many times. And yet this guy is still fighting. If you want to talk about guys with speech slurs, Khan's got speech slurs. You can tell. He's been rattled so many times and this guy is still fighting. Deontay Wilder, yeah, he's never been the best speaker, but he seems like the same guy like he's always been. Sometimes he speaks in third person, but he doesn't seem like he's punch drunk because he doesn't have no slur at all. He still seems to be fine even after the third Fury fight. So, yeah, but again, it's up to him where he's at mentally. Yeah, Dillian Whyte, his ass been knocked out twice, taking bad beatings in fights. Same thing with Joshua. I mean, these heavyweights still got a lot to offer, man. Joshua, yes, he's done better than Whyte and Wilder, obviously. I think Joshua still got something left to prove. He's got to beat Usyk. That's a guy he's got to beat. He's got to get in there with Fury. If Wilder does come back, they need to fight each other. And if Wilder does come back, he needs to fight Dillian Whyte. Joseph Parker, who, by the way, wants that fight, or David Higgins. I think they think Wilder is on his decline. It's perfect time to fight him. But if they were to fight, I wouldn't bet on Joseph Parker to win that fight. Not saying he cannot win it, but I don't know, man. I don't know if Parker can win that fight, but it is what it is. Who would be a good one more fight for Wilder? That's a good part. Hey, shout out to Shiz Bizz. That's a good question. People want to see him lose again and again. Not worth it at all. Whoever Deontay beats, he'll get zero credit. You know what? Watcher, you make an interesting point, and I don't disagree with that because no matter what Deontay Wilder does, he doesn't get no credit. But when he does retire, and this is the same shit happens to a lot of fighters when they retire. Guys like Floyd Mayweather, guys like Lennox Lewis, guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, guys like Muhammad Ali, Ray Robinson, Ezra Charles, the Tommy Loughran's, the Sam Langfords, the Harry Grebs, Tony Canzoneri. I can go on and on and on. Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson. I remember at a time when most of the fighters of that name, particularly Mike Tyson, some people criticize their opposition over the years where they were dominating. But when they retire and they look back at what they've done, they become more appreciative of what they contribute to the sport of boxing. Now, if Wilder could come back and get those wins, yes, people are not going to give him credit for it because people are going to look at it and say, oh, let's say hypothetically he fights AJ, he beats AJ, and they'd be like, well, you beat AJ when he was beaten up already, so that doesn't count. Well, okay, well, Wilder was beaten up with himself, so doesn't that make that an even fight? Or Dillian Whyte. So I see your point, but let's just say if he does notch those 2 wins, and somehow, some way, I don't think it's going to happen, but it could. Let's say if he does fight Fury the 4th time and he beats Fury in that 4th fight, let's say if it does happen hypothetically, people probably still won't give him credit, but once he retires and gets those 3 wins, I'm just saying it hypothetically, if he gets those 3 wins, people will go back. They say, you know what? I ridiculed this guy, but he came back when I thought he was out. He beat those 3 guys that I thought he'd never fight. As Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte. Well, he fought Fury 3 times, but let's say 4th time. He fought him the 4th time, and he finally got his get back in the 4th fight. Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua. If he gets those 3 wins, then yeah, call it a career. He gets in the Hall of Fame if he'll be Hall of Famer truly if he can get those 3 wins. That's just my opinion. I think a consensus would agree with that. Would it be a good warm-up fight for Wilder? That's a good question. I think maybe Charles Martin's coming off a loss, so I mean they're both coming off losses, so I think that'd be a good warm-up fight for Deontay Wilder. Charles Martin, and Adam Kornacki is a good warm-up fight. Who else is there? Derek Chisora. I think Wilder would have no problem with that type of fight, but I know Dave Caldwell was like, nah, man, if that's the case, I'm not training Derek Chisora for that fight because he's worried about Chisora, his health. And you want to talk about punishment? Derek Chisora is taking way too much punishment, more so than Wilder over the last 7 years now, and this guy is still fighting. He's got like 12 losses on his record. This guy is getting knocked out. He's been knocked out a few times, two or 3 times. He's been beaten up a lot. He took a lot of punishment of beating against Joseph Parker in the 2nd fight. And yet this guy is still fighting and getting $1 million paydays, and he has never been a champion, let alone been a European champion. He's been a British champion, and he's getting $1 million paydays, and he's still fighting. He's still an attraction. So, yeah. So, yeah, Wilder's got some options if he decides to come back. Yeah. The Brotherhood says, how many people saying Whyte needs to retire after being knocked out twice? Yeah, there were some people calling for his retirement. I don't get why they were doing that. I'm like, huh? He only got knocked out twice, so why would he retire? Look at the fight with Pavek in the 1st fight. He was winning that fight. He was dominated until he got caught with one good shot, and that was it. So I don't see why anybody would retire from that, but it is what it is. But to be fair, though, that knockout was bad, horribly bad. And the fact that Eddie Hearn was penciling that rematch for 3 months down after that knockout loss, I thought that wasn't a good idea because Dillian needed more time to recover. But he was very fortunate, though, that Povetkin team had to pull out of the fight momentarily. They had to postpone it because he caught COVID. So they had to push the fight back like 3 or 4 months down the road, which benefited Dillian Whyte because he had more time to recover from that knockout. So, yeah, what up, Haplo? Shiz Bizz says that, yeah, Khan and Brook both can't take a punch. You know what? Yeah, Kell Brook and Amir Khan, well, especially Amir Khan, he never had a good punch resistance, even in his prime of his career. But Kell Brook, certainly, his punch resistance is certainly gone. Certainly gone. So that, yeah, I see what you're saying on that, Shiz Bizz. There's many fighters who we thought should retire. And look at them; they're still fighting, and they're still making some bit of success out of it. The Watcher says that the endomorph body type is different. Deontay is an endomorph, so body types that body types like that break down quick, especially in the sport. Yeah, they do. They do. Look at Amir Khan and look at his body type. I would consider that endomorph, and he's still fighting. And he still has some bit of success while he was still fighting after all the knockout losses and beatings he was taking. So, yeah. Richard Sampson says, every individual is different. Wilder may be damaged, doesn't mean others who took punishment took it well, doesn't mean Wilder cancer. Yeah, that's a very good point. And again, these are the heavyweights, man. These heavyweights can absorb more punishment than anybody in the lower weights. That's why their lifespans is a lot longer. I mean, again, there's many heavyweights. Evander Holyfield took a lot of punishment in his career, beatings, knockout losses. Well, the only knockout loss at the time, well, yeah, knockout losses. He had 2 knockout losses on his record, James Toney and Riddick Bowe. He endured all that, and he was still fighting when he was close to 50 years old. Yeah, I mean, I thought he was done after the Lennox Lewis fight, but he kept fighting after that. Hell, let alone the Ruiz trilogies, John Ruiz, that is. I thought he should have called it quits after that, but he kept on fighting. He was actually still finding some moderate success after those fights, but he couldn't get the decision over Chris Bird. He clearly lost that fight. He fought Nikolai Valaev. We all know he won that fight, but didn't get the decision on the card. So it is what it is. Wilder should fight Ruiz. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad comeback fight. I think that's probably the fight they're going to pencil in if he returns. I have a strong feeling that's the case. Yeah. See, Parker wants him now, that Deontay is shot. That's what they believe. But if I'm Joseph Parker, I'd be very careful because Deontay Wilder, he may not be the same fighter physically. Not say physically, but mentally. But as far as him being shot, maybe. But sometimes shot fighters can surprise you. Look at Povetkin. Look at Povetkin. A shot fighter that knocked out Dillian Whyte. So anything can happen. Yeah, Parker's being very, I don't know why Parker's team is calling out Andy Ruiz because, I did comment on this on my live stream from yesterday. And the reason why they're calling out Ruiz because he didn't look good against Chris Arreola. He got hurt several times in that fight. And they thought this is a perfect time to take him. I'm like, well, what's the point? Because you already beat Ruiz. I don't get it. But I could see, again, I see why they're doing it because of that performance, and that's a money fight for them. So Joseph Parker is being very careful who he wants to fight now. So, yeah. Wilder ducked Whyte and cherry-picked the wrong Whyte guy. Well, you could say one thing. Deontay Wilder was being very dismissive of Dillian Whyte. I won't deny that fact. He was offered a record payday. He turned it down. I think he was offered a good payday to go to England to fight on Whyte, but he turned it down. I think the terms were that I think Eddie Hearn wanted a promotional option on Deontay Wilder should he beat Dillian Whyte, and Deontay didn't like that. However, he was going to concede on that point if Anthony Joshua was guaranteed to be the next fighter after he beat Whyte. That's all Deontay Wilder wanted, and Eddie Hearn said no. He was not going to insert any type of stipulation in that contract, and that's why that fight fell through. And this is one of the reasons why Eddie Hearn is being shut out by many promoters, because he always wanted to dictate terms when it comes to these cross-promotional fights. You cannot do that, man. You have to make some concessions where guys are, both parties are satisfied. I know you want to, have things your way, but you can't always do that. And that's the reason why you have Bob Arum and Frank Warren, who's pretty much done a good job of shutting him out. Same thing with American promoters. They don't want nothing to do with him over here. That's why that Canelo and the Plant fight got pushed through, because he couldn't get involved. So I'm not making excuses why Wilder had ducked the Whyte fight, but I could see the reasons why he did. And to be fair, and I don't condone it, but I see the logical reason behind that. To be fair, Dillian Whyte had turned down 2 different eliminators, final eliminators to fight Deontay Wilder. He turned them down. That was Luis Ortiz twice, and he had a chance to fight Dom Brazil. I know that wasn't a fight that wasn't ordered, but Brazil wanted that Dillian Whyte fight. He called Dillian Whyte out. He told him, hey, man, if you got a problem with the mandatory situation, I'll put it on the line against you. And what did Dillian Whyte do? He turned down the invitation and decided to fight Chisora in the rematch instead of Brazil. In fact, Deontay Wilder even told Dillian Whyte, hey, look, if you want to have a fight with me, I'll give you a voluntary defense on the condition that you do a one-fight deal with a PBC. Dillian said no. He didn't want to go to America fight Wilder. He thought he could dictate the terms. He wanted Wilder to come to the UK. I'm like, wait a minute, you're not the champion. Why are you telling the champion where he should go, where not to go? I don't get that. I don't see why a challenger had the right to do that. You're not a fucking Manny Pacquiao type of fighter or Floyd Mayweather. I mean, the arrogance of some of these heavyweights, I swear. Wilder should fight Ruiz. Yeah, I agree with that. Ruiz is done. He looked horrible against Areola. Nah, I wouldn't say that, man. Uh, which is why Whyte should fight him. Yeah. Chisora is not the sharpest tool in the shed. Yeah, we all know that. He's not a very bright guy. So you want Wilder to fight someone done? Makes no sense at all. Are you talking about with the fight doctor? I mean, yeah, well, Ruiz is not done. He's not done, man. I disagree with that notion. Yeah, it's it does as a measuring stick if you to see what if anything Wilder has left. Hey, that's a very good point. Wilder may not be the same fighter after Fury putting a dent in his head. I don't know about all that, but about putting a dent in his head. But we know he's not the same fighter. Again, let's not get it twisted. If you think Tyson Fury is the same fighter after that fight, think again. I honestly believe that Tyson Fury cannot take a punch like he used to after that third Wilder fight. Just wait to see somebody crack him in the chin, and you see how he reacts. I'm telling you, he won't be the same. He won't be able to take a punch like he used to. I believe that. And his legs are not the same. So he's up and down in weight. So that may be playing in his endurance to some extent. So we have to see how Tyson Fury looks in his next fight. And speaking of that, who knows if he fights Dillian Whyte next? Because we're still hearing there's some hurdles behind that. So yeah, that makes that yeah, we have to wait and see how Tyson Fury looks in his next fight. Oh, I see. I agree with that. Yeah, so you agree with Fight Doctor. Yeah, Fight Doctor did make sense. It is like a measuring stick to see how Wilder looks after coming off that bad loss against Fury, back-to-back beatings. So uh, Ruiz versus Wilder makes no sense. On the surface, it doesn't, but if you're looking at it from another standpoint, it is a big money fight, and you have two former world champions. And yeah, it's a good measuring stick, as Fight Doctor said, to see how Wilder looks, after coming back a bad loss against Tyson Fury for the second time. So we'll have to wait and see. You notice Fury always has the same energy from round 1 to round 12. Suspect. Um, you talking about as far as his conditioning and stamina is concerned? Uh, well, I mean, it's hard to say because early in his career, Tyson Fury is always known to have great conditioning. So this is not like a Povetkin situation when Povetkin early in his career had some terrible endurance issues. Then out of nowhere, when he's starting to get in shape, he's starting to have incredible energy, endurance, going to 12 rounds all of a sudden. That was suspect. And we all know how he's able to do that because he was ingesting a drug called meldonium, which was banned by many various athletic committees and even by I think by the what's called the Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. So, and then when Povetkin, realized that he couldn't take the drug anymore, we saw that his endurance and let alone his performance has been declining after the fact that he couldn't take the drug anymore. So, that was suspect, obviously, and he paid the consequences for that situation. As far as Fury, I have seen no evidence of that yet. But we have to see, when he fights Alexander Usyk, if he fights Usyk. So yeah. But to be fair, though, he has been popped with PEDs before, so so there is no. There's definitely a skeleton in the closet when it comes to PEDs and sport. When it comes to PEDs with Tyson Fury. So yeah, the heavyweight division is a sorry division. I mean, not much talent with these big boys. It's definitely some talent. I disagree with that slightly, Samson, but they're definitely some talented guys. May not be the most technical because the heavyweights are not known to be technical guys for the most part. But I think the problem is why they get flack the way they do now, because the assumption is that if you could get the titles off Vladimir Klitschko, and thank God Tyson Fury did that back in 2015, which is almost 7 years ago. When he took the titles off Tyson Fury, and of course Joshua finished him off 2 years later, the idea was that the heavyweight division will be, entering a new era. Thank God the Klitschko era is done because that was a terrible era. I'm just keeping it real. That was a terrible era. Yeah, Vladimir Klitschko was a great fighter, all-time great, but he did fight in an era where the heavyweight division was bad. It was horrible. I think it was a lot worse than the Larry Holmes reign in a way. Now, Larry Holmes, to be fair, Larry Holmes did fight better opposition in his reign, did Vladimir Klitschko did. But if you look at it from hindsight, looking back at that era back then, it was not a good heavyweight division back then because a lot of the great fighters left at the time. You had Ali who retired. I mean, then he came back with a one-off fight against Holmes, which I really don't count. Then you had Ken Norton, who was on his way out. He was way past his prime after the Holmes fight. He was out the door. Joe Frazier retired. Foreman took a hiatus for 10 years. Patterson obviously retired. I mean, he retired, I think, like early 70s, I believe. You know, a lot of guys were out of the heavyweight division at the time, you know. And when Larry Holmes was coming up and he was starting reigning in that division, and at the time you had guys like Ronaldo Snipes, Randall Tex Cobb, and Jerry Coetzee and those guys. Even though Holmes didn't fight them, like Craig Page and the Mike Weavers, they were decent fighters, but they didn't like really stand, as far as the ranks when it comes to the guys that I mentioned who are Hall of Fame fighters. So my point is, at the time when Larry Holmes was reigning, they called that a very weak division back then. If you look at it from hindsight, it was not that good. Let's be real. Larry Holmes was a great all-time great heavyweight, no question about it, but it wasn't really a good division back then. So kind of like Vladimir. My point is that Vladimir Klitschko reigned when the division was terrible. I think it was worse than the Larry Holmes division. That's just my opinion, and many will agree with that. But anyhow, my point is that the assumption was that the heavyweight division will get back to the glory days like it was in the 90s when we have all these guys coming up in the ranks, young champions like Wilder, Joshua, Fury before he had the UCAD scandal, Joseph Parker, who was very promising with the WBO strap. We thought we would get all these guys to fight each other. I mean, to be fair, Parker and Joshua fought each other. Wilder and Fury fought each other 3 times. But it seems like none of them really could mix it up. Joshua was like the only one that was being consistent, while Fury and Wilder would be very selective who they wanted to fight. Joseph Parker, on the other hand, he was somewhat consistent, but after the Anthony Joshua and the Dillian Whyte losses, they seem to be very careful moving him after that. So that's why the heavyweight division is getting a lot of flack now, because there's not too much activity. All these guys pricing each other out, not taking certain fights at a certain moment, like Wilder and Joshua, which I'm still disappointed. Those guys should have fought when they were in their prime, when they were undefeated as champions, but both sides were playing games. Nobody liked the terms for that side. Nobody didn't like the other side, didn't like the terms from the other side. It was a huge mess. And what was the end result? Fury comes back and beat Wilder twice out of 3 fights. Joshua loses his belts 2 times. He loses to Andy Ruiz. He gets it back. Then he gets beat up by Usyk in 2 fights later. Now you got both guys who we really wanted to see for the undisputed strap not have their belts, and they're on the decline now. We don't know if Wilder's going to come back, and we don't know what Joshua's head is at this point, because he seems still fucked up after that Usyk loss. So let me just keep it real. He's fucked up mentally. He's definitely not winning that rematch if he goes back in there. I'm just keeping it real. I think Eddie Hearn is really going to have to work harder to get him to understand that you can't not take that fight. You can't do it. Wilder needs a soft touch in his comeback fight, considering the beatings he took in the hands of Fury in the last 2 fights. Yeah, he definitely needs a soft touch. If it's a Carl's Negron, I can't be mad at that, because he needs a soft touch to see where he's at. So, yeah. Fury's always been a cheater. Well, he's always been a cheater. I mean, he has been cheated before, yes, but we cannot prove that he cheated in the Wilder fight. Let's be real. We cannot prove that at all. Eddie Hearn will put a rematch clause on the tune-up and wonder why nobody wants to work with him. Yeah, that's the thing about that too. That you bring up a good point, Brotherhood. That's the thing why people want to shut out Hearn, because he always wants to dictate terms, especially with these rematch clauses. He never wants to agree to two-way rematch clauses. He always wants to have it one way with his fighters. I don't get it. That's what I've seen. I don't recall the last time he had a fight where there was a two-way rematch clause. Oh yeah, actually there was one. The only fight that I remember, this was a very long time ago, the last time that Eddie Hearn had agreed to a 2-way rematch clause, that was against Vladimir Klitschko. That was the last fight for Joshua. That was back in 2017. And since then, all the rematch clauses that he's inserted for Joshua fights, or I think let alone Dillian Whyte fights as well, they've all been one way. They've been one-way rematch clauses, and he's refused to give the opponent, like Deontay Wilder, for example, a two-way rematch clause. He's refused to do it. And this is the reason why I tell people, man, just because you're the A side doesn't mean you get to always dictate terms. And I think this really fucked up Hearn, and this really backfired on him, the way he's handled the negotiation with Joshua fights. Let's be real. And to be fair, Joshua has been consistent fighting top 10 opponents. I give him that. But when it comes to the Wilders and the Fury situations, the reason why those fights fell through, because they always wanted to dictate, Hearn always wanted to dictate the terms in those fights. He always did. So as an end result, he's being frozen out by his rivals at this point. And you could tell he's frustrated and he's rattled by that too. So, all right, Watcher, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Those mandatories were B, were B. I mean, Whyte was more deserving for Wilder. Wilder faced Areola, remember? Yeah, he did. That's after Povetkin popped for the PEDs in Russia. Whyte at the time wasn't even he wasn't even a world level contender at the time. But to be fair, though, not saying he doesn't deserve a shot. He definitely does. But my point is that he's turned down many opportunities to fight for a title. Many. He's turned down two, like at this point, he's turned down one direct shot at the title against Anthony Joshua in the rematch. I can understand his concerns because it was last minute. It was like a 5-week notice, and he turned it down. Okay. He turned down a final title eliminator against Kubrat Pulev. You know why he turned that down? Because him and Hearn were very confident that they were going to beat Pulev in the purse bid. They wanted to dictate terms for that fight. When they lost the purse bid, what did Dillian Whyte do? He pulled out of the fight. He pulled out 2 title final eliminators against Luis Ortiz, which got him a shot at Deontay Wilder should he beat Ortiz. What did Dillian do? He didn't take the fights. He pulled out of them. Diamond Brazil offered them fight for the mandatory position. What did Dillian do? He passed it up. He declined the invitation, and he decided to fight Derek Chisora instead. So in a rematch, which nobody really wanted to see. It was a good fight, yes, but nobody really cared about it. So he's not an innocent angel here to the extent. I don't know why. This is why I don't buy this crap about him being the victim. Some of it, most of the part is some of it is more of Dillian's own doing, self-inflicted, as you want to call it. So he's turned down many opportunities to get a direct shot at the title or fight in mandatory eliminators to become mandatory. He's passed those up, and he has himself to blame. But hey, he's got a shot now. So I don't know why he's griping about the split. He should take the fucking fight and stop wasting people's time. So yeah, Fury's fine. Wilder is the one done with. We don't know. I mean, Fury seems okay. He's in high spirits, but like I said though, can he take a punch? Because based off that third fight, I'm not sure if his punch resistance is the same. I think Wilder put a huge dent in that armor. Because if Alexander Usyk pops Tyson Fury, man, I'm not sure how well he's going to react to those punches. Or anybody who hits him hard, like Dillian Whyte. If Dillian Whyte cracks Tyson Fury, I don't think Tyson Fury is going to get up. I don't think he can. I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how he can, how his punch resistance is at, but I don't think it's the same after that third Wilder fight. Shiz Bizz says that Fury turned down Undisputed twice. Yeah, he did. Well, the first one, me personally, I think it was all a ruse. I really believe that Undisputed fight with Joshua was not really going to happen. There was no intention to making that fight. As I was talking to Beeb, I do tend to agree with him to an extent that I think Bob Arum, Top Rank, and PBC with Deontay Wilder, they knew all along what was happening. I think they stalled the fight for the third fight as long as they can because they're waiting for the COVID restrictions to die down so they can get the live crowds and live gates to come back. That was the whole point for them to drag that situation along, use Joshua's name in the process, and that's why that Undisputed fight fell through. Now, as far as this one with Usyk, yeah, absolutely. Fury did turn that down. He turned that down. Before the fact, he called Alexander Usyk a pussy, but then he got called out on that by Igor Klimas, who's Usyk's manager, and he told him, "Hey, bro, before you call my fighter a pussy, you might want to check with your team because we agreed to the terms to fight you right away." What does Tyson Fury do? He fucking comes back and says, "Nah, I'm not fighting Usyk right away. I want to enter a fight." Yeah, fucking bitch. Don't call a fighter a pussy. Then all of a sudden you want to check it out, and then you want to check it out by getting an interim fight. Tyson Fury needs to be called out on that. If there's one thing that I agree with Eddie Hearn with, is when he was rattled and he was upset with Kugan Cassius yesterday's interview, he told Kugan that you need to talk to Tyson Fury. You need to ask him, why didn't you accept the Usyk fight? Why did all of a sudden you want to enter a fight? Somebody need to call Fury out on that. They really need to. But at the same time, why is Eddie Hearn upset that Tyson Fury didn't want to take the Usyk fight? Doesn't Joshua have a rematch clause? Why haven't we heard anything about the rematch? Where it's going to take place? Where's the what's the date? Who's Joshua's new training setup? We don't know nothing about that. So this whole situation with the heavyweight scenes is a mess, man. It's a freaking mess. It needs to be cleaned up. Percy says, I don't think Wilder's punch resistance is best either. I'm thinking Wilder's fights a couple easy fights and retire. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, definitely his punch resistance is definitely not the same. I agree with that. Yeah, he may get a couple easy fights and get one major fight in between, and then that's it. He's probably done. Yeah, the way he's speaking, Deontay, it looks like if he really wants to retire, he probably retire before the age of 40. Who knows? He might fight at 40, 41, then he's done. So, yeah. Yeah, what else I have going on? I think that's it, guys. I really wanted to be on here momentarily. Oh, yeah. Tyson Fury calls out Dillian Whyte to sign the contract. In case you guys haven't been following along, the WBC has announced they've received the 10% holding fee to secure the fight, which is an escrow fee, which is part of the bonus. So should the winner of Dillian Whyte Tyson Fury prevail, they'll get a 10% extra bonus on top of their guarantee earnings, whatnot. So the deposit was secured. It was put down by Frank Warren in Top Rank. The only thing left now is the contracts to be signed before February 21st, and also a date and date, location, and venue to be disclosed as well. So, Eddie Hearn, on the other hand, is saying that we haven't received the contract yet. So, my assumption is that since Fury's come out and said this, since the deposit has been secured by the WBC, does that mean the contracts has been sent over to Whyte? If are earned to review the draft of that not the draft, to review the provisions of that contract. So, yeah. So yeah, we have to wait and see, man, how this plays out. But something tells me that some type of intervention is gonna happen where this fight's not gonna happen, man. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just the way I see it, man. So yeah, I just wanted to come out here, guys, and just give you just a brief, not saying brief, but just a bit of a update on Deontay Wilder, where his whereabouts are, what he's been up to. So yeah, recently he gave an interview with Byron Scott, basketball, former basketball player, turned out to be a coach, turned out to be a decent coach, but it seems like he's not coaching nowadays. So he's doing some other things outside of the NBA or basketball. So yeah, man, that's just my take on the whole thing. I really think Deontay has more to offer. I think I think he's got a few fights left in him, and then he's gonna call it quits. I agree with Byron Scott on that assessment when he interviewed him. So, anyways, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and drop off. Shout out to the watcher, Percy Bedford, Shiz Bizz as always, Haplotype, the Fight Doctor, Richard Samson, the Brotherhood, and who else am I missing? Robert, who else? The Boxing Lounge and D Style, who came in here momentarily. So, yeah, shout out to you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and drop off. I'm out. Peace.